Welcome to Every Church a Peace Church, a program that promotes the belief that the church could turn the world towards peace if the church lived and taught as Jesus lived and taught. And today I'm very excited to have my favorite minister, my favorite preacher, my minister, Dr. Barbara King, with us. And we're going to have an exciting program. We're going to talk about your ministry. We're going to talk about Hillside as a peace church, and about how we can become a people of peace in the world. Yeah. Welcome, Dr. Barbara. I love you.
I love you too.
Good.
And I bless you.
And thank you, and I appreciate you for coming and being with us and sharing with our audience. Tell us, for those that perhaps haven't seen you on AIB, where the Hillside is on AIB on Sunday mornings, I believe at 7:30. And haven't seen you about the town and sharing your spirit. Tell us a little bit about the Hillside Ministry, the ministry that has developed me and my family. And you've been the church, and you've been such an important part of my presence. But tell us a little bit about Hillside and what the approach is with Hillside that perhaps is unique.
Well, first of all, Donald, let me just, and may I refer to you as Donald?
If I can say Dr. B or Barbara.
You can say Barbara.
Okay.
You can say Barbara. But let me thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for creating this kind of program, because when you came with the idea, Every Church a Peace Church, even at that moment, I didn't realize how much it could do, not only for Atlanta, but for the world. I really think your idea should be generated all around the country, because the church is the seat of activity for many people. I mean, people go to church, they don't go to place else. And to have something that we can all generate around, I think, means so much. But to go on to Hillside and where you have become a very active participant, you always tell a story about your story. You were an usher, you sang in the choir, you did everything but take the pulpit.
Well, they threw me out the choir.
Yeah, you've been having kind of an odd time. So now you have your own pulpit, and I love it. But Hillside started 31 years ago in my home with a gathering of 12 people. To be as brief as I can, I'd had an idea, well, in my spirit, when I was a little girl, I knew I wanted to be a minister. That seemed very far-fetched because I grew up in a Baptist church in Houston, Texas, where it was unheard of. In fact, people wondered where I got the idea, because there were no women ministers around anywhere. But anyway, we started with 12 people, and we began teaching from a book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. And that group began growing, and it was quite a diverse group, because there were people from the AU Center, where I was at that time employed as an instructor at Atlanta University. There were people who worked in various kinds of businesses, people who worked various kinds of jobs, and even retired people. The group grew from 12 to over 60, and one night I looked at all these people. I said, God, what are you telling me to do? Because I had been ordained, but I had not moved in that direction. I was doing my professional work as a social worker. You know, I'm a graduate of AU School of Social Work. So anyway, when I started the ministry, I just asked one night if there was anyone there that wanted to come together and become a New Thought ministry. Now, New Thought was not, it wasn't strange, because many people in the church had been associated with New Thought through other groups like Religious Science and Unity and some of the other truth centers around the world. And they had heard our great friend and California, Dr. Schuler, who was very much touched by Norman Vincent Peale. Norman Vincent Peale would be considered New Thought for us today, because he always had the positive approach to the message of Jesus Christ. Yeah. One thing about the New Thought message, it reaches all denominations. It has no barriers, because we teach Jesus Christ's principles, but the principles as we teach them can be understood by people, because we're teaching them how to take those principles and use them on an everyday basis, and not relate to them in terms of 2,000 years ago, what Jesus did, but to really see Jesus living in us through those principal days. So we've had Jewish people, we've had Greek people, we've had all kinds of people, Muslims who've come to Hillside, because even though at one point they may not have been able to accept Jesus, but when they really hear his basic principles, they begin to understand, I really can understand why Jesus made his way as the Son of God into the world. So Hillside has been unique because, really, I think of my social work background. That's not the main, because of my total belief in Jesus the Christ. But I think the uniqueness of what we do is because I come from a social work background. And having worked in Chicago for a number of years, where we created different kinds of programs in a group setting, what we call community centers and agencies like that, I always knew, Don, that the church had to play a significant role with not only its inner circle, but with its outer circle. I was blessed to come from a church where, and I'm not going to tell my age on television today, but I came from a church where all of the civil rights, all of the political movements had to come to the church, because that was a time you had no place to go to but the church. Right. So I remember seeing Walter White. I met Walter White as a child, secretary of the NAACP. So even when I came here to go to graduate school in the 50s, at Wheat Street Baptist Church, if any person came and the black community had to do with civil rights or whatever, we saw them in that church, and that's what I grew up in. So coming from that kind of rich background of seeing and hearing and knowing what the crisis was in the black community, knowing what it meant to be in a segregated community, I knew that when I started the ministry, whenever it came forth, that I wanted to do the same thing that my church had done, as well as extend myself and extend our ministry, because so much has changed, just like not every church a peace church. So we came in on a foundation that we were a holistic ministry. We were spirit, we were mind, and we were body. And that was because I had an introduction 30-some years ago into the holistic movement, which had to do with, one, understanding the Spirit of God in them, one, understanding that the mind was the seat of all activity, and one, understanding that the mind controlled the body, so that the body had to be taken care of. And see, the whole thing about us being so religious, so spiritual, but not taking care of our bodies. And people die in the church like they do any place else. So I wanted to see us come together with a holistic approach, so we could teach people not only to be spiritual beings, which is the ultimate, but to know that they can take that mind and have that mind in a position to work for them rather than against them. And you can't deal with the mind without dealing with the emotions. And then from there, then you can take care of the body temple. But if you're just all spiritual, that's not enough. If you're just all intellect, that's not enough. So you got to be a combination of both.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the openness that Hillside has. We're going to take a break right now for Kathleen Jackson Bertrand, who's been at Hillside many times and shared her spirit with us. Sing. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the role of peace and where do we find peace, not only in the world but in ourselves. And right after we hear from Kathleen Bertrand and her accompanist, Phil Davis.
What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another mountain. There are mountains and hillsides enough to climb. There are oceans and rivers enough to cross, enough to last till the end of time. But what the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another meadow. There are cornfields and wheat fields enough to grow. There are sunbeams and moonbeams enough to shine. Oh, listen, Lord, if you want to know what the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. And no, not just for some, oh, but just for
Thank you, Kathleen and Phil Davis. Kathleen Jackson Bertrand and Phil Davis are accompanying us. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. Remember we used to sing that as a regular part of our service?
That's right.
You always held hands and sang that song. And it's still a very potent song.
Yes, it is.
And one that Kathleen sings so well.
Mm-hmm.
Every church, a peace church, is an idea that is not new, but is an idea that seems to cry out for it to be presented to the world, that every church should be a peace church. Every faith should be a peace faith, because every faith has as its core peace and love and respect for humanity.
Yeah.
Hillside is a peace church. What do you think? Where do we get peace? If we want peace in the world, where should it start?
Well, as a follower of Jesus the Christ, I'm reminded of the Beatitudes. And one of the Beatitudes tells us, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." I think what has happened to us in the church is that, and just in the world period, we are so involved in our humanity, what we are as human beings, what we cannot accomplish, what we cannot do, what we cannot be. We're victims of our own so-called circumstances. And I think what happens is we forget that according to the Bible, in terms of its richness and its heritage, and according to the teachers of the past, we've forgotten that we are a divine, I'm going to use the word mechanism for all of the intellects out there. We are a divine mechanism. We really have a divineness about us as well as the human. And so we fail to remember that really within that inner self, within that perfect part of us, which we call spirit, which we call the Christ within, many people call it Jesus within, no matter what your name is for, there is a presence that makes us perfect and whole regardless of what we are in the outer. And what we are always trying to do is bring those two things together, our spiritual unity in line with our humanity. And so we've forgotten that we don't have to have violence to have peace. What has happened is we've used treaties and agreements and everything we can think of to bring about peace, and it's on the written paper. But until humanity, humankind, as I often say, begins to realize that they already have peace within. Peace is a harmonious calmness within us that's in our minds, and we don't know that. So we think we have to lash out, reach out to get peace. You start being peaceful yourself. For example, I had an experience, even as a minister, but I'm still in my human form. Had an experience last week, and I allowed myself for just about 15 minutes to just get all up in there about it. And I stopped. Not only did I use an affirmation, not only did I stop and do just a 5-minute meditation, because the peace I needed was not out here. What I looked at was what was out there, what was going on. But I didn't really realize that I could calm myself down so I could even listen to myself and begin to know. So I think that's the challenge, Donald, for the church, is that we are not moving people to realize the power that is within them to come to where they have to go. Now, if you get one person or two persons, you get a number of people in the church thinking the same thing, then what happens is you got a unity of spirit, you got a unity of purpose, and that's where the power comes. That's what you're doing. Every church, a peace church, and we can get people to know how to teach people to be peaceful, then we got power.
Yeah.
And I really believe that with the movement that you have, as a part of a greater movement, that's why things have been as peaceful as they have. See, people understand the power of prayer and the power of people coming together on one idea. We call it race consciousness, because what we're saying is if enough people think the same thing, then we can bring about the change. And that's where the weakness is. We don't know how much power we have. I went to see the movie Bruce Almighty last night, and he, after God gave, he said, "I got the power, I got," and that's the whole thing. Now that was in the movie, but that movie had a lot of lessons to it, and he learned a lot of lessons from having all that power. He didn't know how to use it, but being peaceful is something that each person can achieve, and we can get our people in government and in higher places to understand that, and that it has to come from within. Because sometimes people sit at the peace table and say they want peace. This has happened many times, we know, in the past, and they come right back to violence.
Yes. Well, I mean, we are made in the image and likeness of God.
That's
I mean, God is He's the God that we worship is a God of peace and love, and one of connection of all of those parts.
Yeah.
Express God, and so many times I think that we don't recognize that every human being is formed in the image and likeness of God, even those so-called enemies of ours.
They're still
and that the core of the human spirit is a core that wants to cooperate, wants compassion, to give and receive compassion and love, which is the core value of the major faiths that are in the world. And if we can just go back to that, go back to the core, go back to the faiths of the core values of these faiths, which is love and respect, then we can form the politic that expresses that. Yeah. Instead of having the politic really in confrontation with ourselves as the Spirit of God.
Right. I hear what you're saying, and also with that, Don, the church has got to go to a transformation, because the church has been just as violent in many instances,
or at least tolerated violence.
No, in many instances, the church has been a very violent instrument. When you see ministers who have taken upon themselves to kill a doctor or someone who's for abortion, I mean, the church, the teachings sometimes have been, this Bible, my Bible, your Bible, these Bibles have been mistranslated in terms of the relationship of people to people, color to color, race to race, religion to religion. So the work has got to be in the church. I think it starts with the training of the ministers in the seminary. I think that the seminary program should be broad enough to give to the ministers in training the process for coming out and being ministers who bring forth peace, who bring forth love. Because many times there are churches that have fightings in the church and misunderstandings they're never dealt with. And so I think that's why I said your idea is a powerful one, because we really have a lot of work to do, and I'm always for prevention. I don't know what we can do about where we are now, but I believe if we can start preventative programs now, so the church gets back into its idea of peace and love.
Yeah.
You don't hear very much about peace and love.
Huh?
And I know people that go to church and come out and say, I just felt like I was sitting there because nobody said good morning. Nobody touched the hand. Yeah. We've always done a lot of hand holding and hugging. People always say, don't go to Hillside, because they're going to get you to Hillside. People don't come to church on time because they don't want to hug anybody, But that's the element. That's the very element of what you're saying, what comes from within us. That's why I blessed all the peacemakers, because Jesus said, if we make peace with ourselves, if we know we are sons and daughters of God, which is another thing you don't hear very much. You don't hear very many people saying we are sons and daughters of God. It's almost like it's a fear thought. But we are. And you brought it out so beautifully. We created an image and likeness. So we are spiritual beings. The human part was added later, but it was the spirit that came first. Yes. So if we could get that idea across, and I think it starts in the seminary, I think it starts in the prayer meetings. I think it starts in the Bible study, because there are many groups that are still, still believing that we're the scum of the earth as African Americans, and you're not going to have peace with that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, the African American church in particular has been so important in terms of its empowering people to face and confront violence and oppression of segregation and all slavery and its aftermath. It's an ongoing process. And we would like to see that same type of use of the church as a place where people of peace can come together, to be instructed, to be spiritually energized, and to be informed and motivated to act. And to act, that's important. Just as we acted in the freedom movement, and we didn't stay in the church. We went from the church to the streets, and we have to go from the church to the streets, just as we did on June 30th in 2001, when we had about 1,000 people from 10 churches along Cascade marching down Cascade, Cascade for Peace, as you may recall. And it was an energizing moment, because it was a time where we had to make decisions. Are we going to be succumb to revenge, or are we going to be energized towards forgiveness and compassion? And I believe that was a mark for us, that we wanted to stand and march for compassion and love, because we know that violence does not, you can't fight fire with fire. You fight fire with water. And just as you can't fight evil with evil, what we wanted to do is then and is now is to be an expression of love, to use love. C.T. Vivian, who's been a guest on the show, talks about radical love. That really, that kind of love that Jesus had, that even at the moment of his suffering and struggle, that he still talked about love and compassion and forgiveness. He demonstrated it, no question about it. And as our model, a real life model, a signpost, as you will, we could look at the life of Jesus and say, well, this is what we're supposed to be as Christians, not only as Christians, but as part of the human family. And that's why it's so important that ministers such as yourself and the other guests that we've had on the show, Dr. Rocco Errico is also associate minister at Hillside, and Reverend Durley and Reverend C.T. Vivian, and who've also been guests. They've all talked about the importance of our recognition that we are a part of a human family, and that when we strike out against another member of our human family, we are striking against the love that and the spirit that's the image that God has placed in us.
Well, and that's why I think, again, I'll go back to, you mentioned the march that we had on that Sunday, is that somehow these kind of events have to continue moving in our community.
Yes.
You see, we can go to the hotels now, we can go to the convention centers, whereas before the church was the hub for for all of the social and civic activities. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the people going to these various places for the activities are Christians and true students and Muslims and Jews and whatever. And so if somehow we can keep the movement going and not let it die out, then I think we are creating a new impact that seems to have kind of slowed down a little bit along the way in terms of what we're saying, what C.T. and Durr and all of them were saying, and what I'm still saying. You have to keep the movement going. But while you're working in the street, you've got to also work on the inner in terms of where it really begins. And I think that the possibilities are so beautiful. I just don't believe that this war would have ended as fast or would have come to the halt it did had it not been some praying people and people who were praying for peace. And this time, it was all over the world.
Yes, and you talked about prevention, and of course, it's the power of prayer of peacemakers to prevent us from kind of rolling from country to country in search of empire, and that's what we want to be able to confront with the truth of the message that Jesus led them, that Jesus was not, his empire was an empire of love and of compassion. And that's where his authority came from. And we must be prepared to maintain the vigilance and to pay attention to what's going on, so that we can meet the developments, so that sometimes our politicians lead us with prayer, so that they don't go where perhaps violence would take them, but they go where the peacemakers, the people who feel that the true peace lies in an understanding and reconciliation of differences in a nonviolent manner.
Well, you know, my grandmother used to always say when I was younger that the head of an organization is what makes the organization. If the head is a peaceful, loving, instructional person, the organization will be that way. And that's why I'm going to mention prevention again, but I think we have to be able to help the leaders. There should be some training. There are many people who are so new in the field of what they're doing, and there needs to be some training of how to be a peaceful person. When I go back to Jesus, if you know you're a son of God, how many people believe that they are a son and a daughter of God? People don't even know I'm a spiritual being. They don't even know. All they know is that God is somewhere out here, and I'm here, and I'm making a plea. We teach that presence is right within you. And somehow we've got to help people to understand they are sons and daughters of God, no matter what banner they're under. Because I listened to the Dalai Lama. And who could be more peaceful and teach peace and love than the Dalai Lama? But I'm not a member of the Dalai Lama's following.
Well, we're running close to time, unfortunately, but we'll have you back.
Okay.
And I want to, if you want to see more and hear more of Hillside and Dr. Barbara, then please come and worship with us on 10:30 Sunday mornings at 2450 Cascade. If you want to learn also more about the Every Church a Peace Church movement, then feel free to go to our website address, which is www.ecapc.org. That's www.ecapc.org. Let me conclude with what Martin King had said. A solution to the present crisis will not take place unless men and women work for it. Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Even a superficial look at history reveals that no social advance rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. Every step towards the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. That's the words from Martin, and that's the words of today. Be a peacemaker, and thank you. And join us again for Every Church a Peace Church.
How long will it take to realize we made a big mistake? If we turned our back